Sipho Pityana is the president of Business Unity South Africa, and he joins us now on Skype. A very good morning to you, Mr. Pityana. This morning, the Minister of Health, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, announcing an increase of the number of infections for COVID-19 to 709. Are you worried by this upward trend?
No, we all expected that the trend would be upward for a period of time, and then it would the curve would then flatten if the interventions that are. The more we exposed, the more we're able to deal with this, and the more we get a sense of how it is spreading. So hopefully there will be a point where the trend will reverse.
Reprioritization is now the key focus. What is Business Unity saying to its members about their role in the lockdown process?
Well, as you know, it has requisite capacity to deal with the health challenge first, so we'll combine at the disposal of government to work together to put out our infrastructure, support monitoring, testing, and all of those. If there's need to facilitate health facilities in the private sector, that those should be made available. So is to make sure that there's a comprehensive response that optimizes on the infrastructure that is at the disposal of the country. So that's gone quite well. By the way, the responding entities is not just hospital groups and pharmaceuticals, etc., which is important, but also industrials that have health infrastructure. For instance, Anglo Gold Ashanti has offered that 2 of its hospitals can maybe used by government for whatever purpose as an infrastructure is readily available. So from the health point of view, we think that there's fantastic cooperation, and Minister Mkhize is leading us very well there. The next area, economy, how we make sure that this major that we are going to go through as a result of lockdown, its impact is minimized, and no doubt it will be disruptive. Some businesses may never come back. There's going to be jobs that are going to be lost, but we have a duty and a responsibility to make sure that the level is minimized as much as possible. And there we have 9 work streams that are looking at what happens with SMMEs, how do we ensure that we secure supply chains, how do we look at ensuring that there is import substitution in areas where we otherwise normally rely on imports, etc., etc. So there are teams that are from the various areas of the private sector working with government directly, making suggestions of what needs to be done and offering assistance.
So when you talk about import substitutions, on the one hand, there are closures and restrictions in terms of the lockdown, and then there are areas where business should be prepared for a spike in demand as different forms of businesses are required. How will this be balanced out?
Well, import substitution is those areas where we think that on a going forward basis, we actually have difficulties getting some of the products, but they are critical for the economy. So we're looking at all of those. Government has idea of some of what those are, and we exchange views and information on all of that. So that will be prioritized depending on the capacity of the various areas. Now remember that we are identifying what we call essential services, which is a language that is associated with labor relations, but in this context, it has to be broader because there may be areas that are affected by lockdown that turn out to be essential to the supply chain for the economy. And therefore, we're in constant exchange with the Department of Trade and Industry on what those should look like, so that we make sure that the disruptions are minimized.
You've touched on it a bit, but where there is a loss of business activity, have you calculated the cost and which sectors will be most affected?
Well, as you can see, already the tourism sector, the small businesses are going to be impacted, and this is our biggest concern because small businesses are major drivers of the economy, and they generate a great deal of employment, and therefore the impact on small businesses will be far-reaching. So that's why you hear a great deal of the conversation is focusing on what we do to cushion small businesses to minimize the impact and enable them to sustain the period of lockdown with some of the measures that are being introduced. I hear that obviously there are people who are suggesting that the fiscal measures are not going far enough. Of course, this is impacting us at a time when we have serious fiscal constraints. Government doesn't have as much resources as we would love it to have. So when you look at what's happening in Europe with the British government and the Americans, what they're doing and how much resources they're throwing at this, we must remember that they were in a far better position than we were. So this catches us at the worst time. So it's not time to mourn. That's why we've decided to work with government to mobilize the private sector and try and make sure that there is this solidarity fund so that those of the private sector that can afford contribute in order to assist, particularly to mitigate the impact on health, but also in regard to small and medium enterprises.
Can we ask you to talk to us some more about those complaints that fiscal measures are not going far enough? Is this the time to be having that kind of conversation?
Well, I guess it's legitimate. Every conversation should be had, and that government and all of us who are in the middle of this need to take that feedback to heart and see if, in fact, we're not being overly conservative in the interventions that are being made. But there has to be reprioritization of resources. There has to be focusing to make sure that the interventions that we're making are targeted. Some of the companies that may be deserving may actually miss out because the priority is elsewhere. The resources are limited. So we must do what we have to do in this very uncharted waters that we are navigating our way through.
Is the Solidarity Fund a solid intervention, and are you contributing to it?
All of us must contribute to it. The feedback I'm getting in the initial stages of this initiative is that the response from private sector is encouraging. It's early days yet. So we need to make sure that we all chip in and make sure that we make our contribution. This is really, we're not all in the same place. Some of the bigger players in the economy may be able to weather the storm, but in the next period of 80 to 100 days, if we don't have well-considered and thought-through interventions, some in the small and medium enterprise space may be decimated. So it's a very serious intervention that we need to look at. And by the way, it's not as though the bigger players can afford that to see that happen, because this economy is integrated. We rely on each other. They sometimes constitute, the smaller businesses constitute a very important part of our supply chain.
Of course, there are also opportunities to do business differently. Have you identified any sectors that can continue to operate and even thrive remotely?
Well, many services sectors are capable of operating remotely. The higher you are in other sectors, in the leadership structures, a great deal of that work can be done remotely. Without a doubt, this is going to present a challenge to the ways of work as we know them. There's going to be a challenge to habits and culture and the methods of work. Post this crisis, I think that the nature of work is likely to be slightly different.
You were conducting regular monthly meetings with the president in terms of interventions to revive the South African economy. Does this new eventuality change that scenario?
Oh, it does. This is a major disruption. I mean, we're talking about restructuring of the economy and looking at repositioning it in terms of the broad approach to areas that are growth segments of the economy. Where we are now is this lockdown basically is switching off the engines in many respects, because some companies are going to close for this period of time, and there's going to be consequential impact as a result of their closure, whether others want to close or not. But because the main consumers of their products are closed, they're supposed to close too. So this is going to have quite an impact. It's going to have a negative impact on consumer demand because some people are not going to be able to earn as much as they've been earning. So this is a major. It's going to have a major impact. We have to go back to the drawing board and think about what does it mean to restart an economy that you stopped at a time for a very good reason. What does it take to restart it and make sure that it accelerates? So where we're in recession, we're going to be in much deeper recession in the next period.
Just quickly, Mr. Pityana, we're counting down to the lockdown on Friday. What's the overall message that Business Unity South Africa wants to send out?
Well, we would urge everybody to support government initiative. Government and the President in particular has been very generous with his time in consulting with us and making sure that as business we are on board. We are very confident that we have the ear of government to bring to their attention the concerns and interests of business to make sure that wherever necessary there are opportunities to open up to make sure that business continuity is sustained to the extent possible. But all of us have got to make sure that this lockdown works. Short of this is a much greater threat to our country, let alone the economy.
Thanks for talking to us this morning. Sipho Pityana is the president of Business Unity South Africa.